Good evening, everybody. It's once again time for the internet's favorite movie centric list making podcast 10 to 1. I am one of your hosts, Josh, joined with me, as always, by the coder from another
Motor.
motor.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Jen.
It rhymes. It's good. It's all good. It's all good.
Should have thought about that before I said words.
I find that happens to me as well. I see. No, that's not actually true. I okay. Weigh in on this debate. Do you have inner monologue or do you not have inner monologue?
Inner monologue. My
Mm-hmm.
my inner monologue is more like inner novels. I'm just constantly in my head. I have inner monologue. I have inner dialogue.
So you do, but you hear either a voice or your voice as like when you go through things or when you are parsing something to explain it, you hear it in your head first before you say it. Yes.
Yes, I have not just my voice. I have a lot of different voices in my head.
Okay,
Uh,
well, I slow down there, Sybil. It's so cool. Okay, no, but what I just found this out recently. I mean, recently, like internet recently, that some people don't have an inner voice. They don't hear things before they say them. Now, I'm not saying that like I say everything in my head before I say it, but if I'm thinking about something, I'm hearing it. I'm actively participating in it so that I can explain it properly. The interesting thing about the conversation with people that don't have inner monologue is that they don't seem to feel as if they're missing anything either. And I can't imagine it. I can't. Like, how do you, as an author, as someone who has written books that were 400 plus pages, I can't imagine sitting down to my desk and not hearing narrative in my head as I was typing. But apparently, there are even authors that don't have inner dialogue, inner monologue, and I'm astounded by that. Like, how do you live your life? That's scary.
how do they know what it sounds like?
I don't know.
Like I right before we went to air, I told you about this poetry book that I'm putting together,
Right.
and there are certain pieces that have very specific voices. When I'm writing when I'm writing them, some of the
Mhm.
some of the longer, more introspective pieces, you know, I straight up say this is. I hear Lin Manuel Miranda in my head uh, speaking when I write this.
Wow.
That it's just and it I know that's kind of different than maybe if having an inner monologue in your head, but it goes with the idea that my thoughts are my narration, and narration requires a narrator.
See, that's what I would think too. But okay, apparently, the way that it works with people that don't have an inner dialogue is somehow they are able to piece together everything they need to piece together sort of in the moment without having to think things through perhaps. And so I was wondering if maybe that is the reason that sometimes when people tell a story it feels a lot more jumbled and not as coherent. Like it doesn't have as much sort of cohesion, narrative function to it because they're not thinking about it before they say it. But I don't know. I don't know how it works. It would just
Yeah, it just seems
explain
really weird to me.
it. was.
When they're reading, do they not hear the words?
I also discovered that when you ask people, and this just this always has made me feel weird. When you ask people to think about the number two, that what do you think of when I say the number two? What do you think of? Just
I
or
think of
number
the number
four
2.
or number four. Like okay, so you think of a number that is two, right?
Mhm.
Okay, I when somebody says two, think of the word two. Now, obviously, that doesn't translate into maths. So I have to be able to, when I see things on paper, sort of quickly shift from you're asking me about whatever I'm having, whatever the connotation is for that number. It comes up as a word for me. What gets really weird is like if you say 1854, I can see that number, but I will think about it as a word. I will not think about it as an actual number. So I guess all of this is to say we're all weird. Oh, I know what the other one was. The other one was if you think about the alphabet, do you see the alphabet spelled out horizontally or do you see it vertically? Because I see it vertically. So I go down in my head this vertical list of letters, and apparently most people see it horizontally. And I have no idea why I see it vertically. I don't speak Japanese. It's not like I'm out there writing kanji or anything, which, that would explain some things. But no, no, I don't. So
I see it horizontally.
I think that's the default. I think most people do.
What if I said I see it diagonally
Well, that would be really interesting. That would be super interesting.
in a circle?
That feels like it would take up. Oh, in a circle would be super cool though. Think about the possibilities on that one. I like that. I don't know how utilitarian being able to see lists in a circle would be though. I feel like that would be really hard to figure out what you were trying to grasp. But it's
Hmm.
an interesting to me it's so interesting this concept of what is it that we're thinking and why are we thinking it? And I have to say that I had a reason for all of this. It segues into what we do, putting together lists. There is an interesting dynamic that I have been privy to recently with the way that people think about, especially genre films, where they, it's not just that they don't like the genre, it's that they really don't like, okay, I'll give you an example. I was in a writers group chat and we were talking about the kind of thing that we'd like to write about. And that turned into what kind of movies do we actually watch and does it differ from what we like to write? And one of the things that came up was a bunch of people, like too many people for this not to be a thing, said that they don't like fantasy films because fantasy makes them feel as if what they're seeing on the screen isn't true or isn't possible. And I mean, for me, like, well, that's the purpose. We label things as magic to sort of give ourselves that, um, possibility. And I guess for some people, it's very disorienting, and they really just can't fathom it. They don't like it, and it just blew me away. Like, really, it blew me away. There was one person in the group who is a writer who writes mostly mysteries. But their whole take on this was they didn't like things even like when their kids were reading the Twilight books. He simply couldn't understand what they found interesting in a book about beings that just simply couldn't be. And I thought, that is so interesting, and I wonder how many people watch movies or don't watch movies based on some of those ideas. Like, are there any genres of movie that you just simply won't watch just because, no, on principle, I just won't watch this? Okay, and I'll make this a little bit easier. I'll take out, anything that would be a snuff film or, outright pornography or anything like that. Is there anything in mainstream entertainment that is a specific kind of genre film that you just won't watch, and for what reason?
Is Zack Snyder a genre film?
Um, no. That's just okay. I won't say it because that's mean. But I will say that your preference isn't the same as exclusion of, because like you'll watch
Ah,
other superhero movies, right?
yes. I
Okay.
if you only knew. Um, let's see. An exclusionary genre. I can't think of anything that I would outright exclude off hand since you took out, things that would be more or less problematic from a moral standpoint.
Right, right.
Um, I I'll watch a western. I'll watch a fantasy.
Yeah.
I'll watch pretty much anything except Rebel Moon Part Two, and I'm pretty wide open as far as genres go.
I'll be honest. There are some genres that I like less than
Well, of
others,
course.
but I've been crazy surprised by some movies that are like way outside of my, this is my usual genre. Um, and I all of a sudden I'll beam about something and somebody will go, "Wow, that's so weird that you love that movie because I just wouldn't imagine that." Like, I'm not a huge fan of rom-coms, but there's plenty of them out there that are really good. And I don't dislike the whole genre. I just generally dislike a lot of the movies that kind of touch on it. I just generally don't usually get into the subject. It's just, I don't know. It always seems a little bit um what's a good word for this? It always feels like it is too sappy. And I don't really do sappy all that much. But that doesn't mean that it isn't also good, because one of my favorite stupid Christmas movies is absolutely a rom-com, and it's way silly, and honestly it kind of doesn't even make sense, and I absolutely don't care. And that's definitely a rom-com. So like there are things like that which
Title.
I it's called A Night for Christmas. It
Mm,
stars Vanessa Hudgens, I think, and I forgot the guy's name, but he's a knight. He comes back from the past into her little world, and they, do the rom-com thing where they go to a festival and they kind of fall in love, and it's all very magical. It's all great. I love it. Mainly probably because I also love, medieval stuff, and maybe that's why, I don't know. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is it's not a horror movie, it's not a drama movie. uh, on principle, I don't tend to really enjoy reading Tom Clancy novels. They're just not interesting to me. But give me The Hunt for Red October as a movie, and I'm all over it. I will watch that movie 10 times to Sunday. It's great. I absolutely love it. And that absolutely is Tom Clancy. So that's why I've sort of like not made those, oh, it's this kind of movie, so I'm not going to like it, or it's this kind of movie, I'm not going to like it, because I've been so surprised in the past before. Um, but I'm really amazed at the number of people that actually make entertainment. Um, they make choices based on excluding whole genres of entertainment. Because no, I one of the people in the chat said, "I will not and never have seen a superhero movie. And so, of course, people clamored on that one. Why not superhero movies? What's wrong with it? And they basically said that it's kind of like, every the superhero movies just sort of hide the I wish I could be better without doing the work. And I mean, that's valid. That's a totally valid way of thinking about it. But it also is like, wow, you just excluded so many really good movies because there are some really good movies that are superhero movies.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah. But I mean, like, I see what she was saying. I understand. Yes, that is kind of a cheap way of, getting people to have things that, but you don't work for superpowers. Like, it's just not, that's not what it's about, It was just interesting. I just thought it was like crazy, crazy, crazy interesting. Because
Tell her to watch Winter Soldier.
I don't find, I mean, I, I I feel, you know what it is? I feel like you and I might be similar in this sort of situation. I am like this is going to sound terrible, but I'm like a media scavenger. Okay. I
Okay.
will consume any kind of media just to sort of get a taste for it, see what it's about. I don't always stick with everything if I'm really not going to like it. I'm one of the few people on the planet that didn't like the Cameron Avatar movies. I never liked them.
Never seen them.
Either one. I don't know what it is that I recognize that other people were like watching these movies 4, 6, 8 times in the theater, and it was like a spiritual encounter for them, and I'm so there for that. I love it. I love that media can do that to people because that just speaks to the power of being a good filmmaker. It didn't do that for me, and I didn't really enjoy it. I have my theories about that. But I also didn't like the second movie. I just couldn't get into it. It just wasn't what I wanted to see. And so I but that doesn't mean that if James Cameron makes another Avatar movie that I won't go see it, because I will. I trust that he is a good enough of a filmmaker to continue to keep my faith. I mean, heck, I even see every M. Night Shyamalan movie. And most people just give up on M. Night Shyamalan and go, no, it's going to be terrible or whatever.
Sometimes
That's
that's
why
why you watch.
that's why I was asking for you if you had any of those. Like, is there anything that you can think of that you just are just like, no, no, I'm never going to go see that kind of movie?
Not genre wise. Like I said, I haven't seen Avatar. I have no intention of watching any of the Avatar movies. Shyamalan, that he might as well be a genre, but I still give him a shot because you never know what the next movie is going to be.
That's
But
true.
no, I do not exclude entire groups of anything because I'm very quick to be like, I might like this. And why would I shut that down?
I do think that there is a good reason for people who are putting together lists of movies um to recognize that they have a bias towards certain types of movies. And I mean, I freely recognize that so much of what I have watched and continue to watch is consumed by either super high fantasy, thriller, and horror movies, or kind of horror slash thrillers, things like that. Um, and I know that that makes up a lot of what I like, right? And it shows in my list. When I go back and I look through all my lists, it really shows. But it isn't like those are the only movies on my list. And it isn't like when somebody makes a suggestion for a film that they think that I would like, that I don't go wow, yeah, this could actually be really good, and I'll absolutely go and see it, or I'll absolutely find it. Things like that are what I think make sort of you and I, especially, an interesting pair for putting these lists together, because I do think that there are people out there, and especially based on that conversation with all those people in the chat, that really can't see into the actual movie itself because they can't get past whatever, the subject matter or the genre or just whatever it is, the label. Um and I guess that's all to say, like, when I look back over the list that you and I have created, we have really created a very diverse group of movies that span everything. I mean, we have a little of everything on all of our lists. There's some things that are sparse, but we definitely have a little of everything on our lists.
You want to hear some stats real quick?
Yeah,
Okay.
throw them on me. I know this is going to actually come from Letterboxd, and that's good because we should be represented by Letterboxd.
Yes, from my account on letterboxd.com, where you can keep track of all the movies you watch. And, it gives you really insane stats. Like, I've logged 2,768 films for a total of 5,028 hours
I mean,
from
damn, that's a lot.
1,500 directors in 47 countries. So, yeah.
That's a lot.
Um, yeah, it kind of is. But it also breaks it down by genre. So, uh, the categories are comedy, drama, action, adventure, thriller, family, sci-fi, crime, fantasy, and romance. Those are the major ones. It
Okay.
even breaks down into like themes and nano genres, but don't have to go into that. But out of the major ones, my highest film count is comedy, uh, 1,442 films.
Okay.
Uh, my lowest is romance, and that still sits at 339 films.
Wow.
So between um, all of the categories, it my lowest is 339. Lowest. So I will give virtually any genre not only a chance, but I'd say a darn decent chance to make my day.
You know, um, okay, so this is not uh this isn't a brag or anything. Um but it does sort of I think it also speaks to how old I am. It does sort of speak to how invested I am in movies altogether, because um I sat down, oh gosh, quite some time ago, and put together, so now this is actually old stats, and put together all of the movies that I had seen, and it's it is a massive flippin' list. And the way that I did it was the movies are inside of a database, and you check off all the movies that you've seen. And I right now am at 6,850 something. Then I was. Now I'm probably more like, over. I'm probably, yeah. Now I'm actually, I got to be over that thousand mark. So that eh, that gives me the range of how invested in films I am. I'm so invested in them that if you multiply two, well, let's just say that, like, a lot of movies run at the 90-minute mark, right? There's a lot that go over, but that's fairly recent. So we'll say that most movies average out at the 90-minute mark. If most movies average at the 90-minute mark and you've watched over 6,000, that is a phenomenal amount of your life that you have been consuming media. Like it's huge. It's absolutely huge. So I hope that it reflects in our list that we don't play favorites with genres, because I would hate to think that we were passing up good movies just because we whatever didn't like this or didn't like that. Like, just that would make me so sad.
I couldn't even imagine saying I'm not going to watch that because it has a dragon in it.
It's yeah. I I I mean, I'm struggling with words because that's how I feel too. But I feel okay. So we're picking on fantasy a little bit because fantasy sort of does. I think it really does make people feel sometimes weirdly uncomfortable, which is odd. But
It has a reputation.
I mean, to me, this would sort of be like, if somebody says, no, I never watch James Bond movies because I find them too violent, or I just don't like spy movies, or but there's so many kinds of spy movies. Like it isn't there's our genre titles are so wide open. I mean, I've seen some horror movies which actually feel far more sci-fi than, yes, they're scary, but they're scary in a way that is completely grounded in, you know, a kind of it's not supernatural. I guess maybe that's the best way to say it. And that somebody told me that that's why they don't watch horror. That they don't watch horror because there's too much supernatural voodoo in it. And I was like, wow. Okay, that's not really true. A lot of horror movies, first of all, the supernatural is almost 90 something percent of the time a metaphor for some kind of mental illness or some kind of top level human behavioral dysfunction. I mean, it's almost always that way. So you can read into it however you want to read into that. In the same way that movies that are heavily about that very stylized martial arts, where people like House of Flying Daggers and things like that, it it this is a visualization. This is the metaphor of the fighting style, not necessarily the fighting style. Um, so that always sort of makes me go, "Wow!" Can you imagine the number of people that wouldn't watch Hero, which was a movie that I was like, "Josh, you got to watch this movie," simply because they don't like movies that have martial arts in it. Like you don't know what you're
What?
missing. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I don't watch movies with martial arts in it. And I'm like, y- th- wow. I just don't even know where to start with that because it's just so huge. Like there's so much that you miss out on by not embracing every style of movie. So, anyway, sorry that that was so long, but I thought it was worth mentioning because when we put our list together, I'm really impressed with the amount of diversity in terms of the mix up of genres that we put into stuff. It's actually quite refreshing. I have seen other people that create lists that create them with almost a continual pivot toward one type of movie, and it makes the whole list process a lot more challenging to really come up with what the list is about instead of oh, this is here's movies that all fit into my personal style that also happen to touch on this topic. Does that make sense? Well, I hope it makes sense anyway.
It does make sense. I kind of got caught up on a comment, and then you just made that other people make lists.
They do actually,
That
quite a
can't be
few.
true.
Yeah, yeah, actually quite a few. Not as good as ours.
Absolutely not.
I completely agree with that. Just not as good as ours. So, speaking of lists, what is our list about this week?
Well, I'll go back to what you said earlier about people not watching a movie because of martial arts. It's so weird because if that were the case, they're really going to hate our list tonight because our lists are all about 1980s action heroes. Not just action films because, quite frankly, there were a ton of them,
There
but
were.
sometimes those heroes were in more than one film. Then that's what we call a film series. And yeah, people today complain about why is everything a sequel? Yeah, well, that's a tale as old as time. So it's not only a tale as old as time, it's a sequel as old as time too. Anyway, I thought that would play better in my head.
Al- al-
Anyway,
Also, if you ever really do want to talk about this, we absolutely can do a podcast about how licensing works because that's a pretty fascinating topic and one that's pretty hot in Hollywood right now. So I
it's
loved making
definitely
this list, by the way. This was a great list to put together.
yeah. I come up with a good one every now and then. What can I say?
One, I'm really partial to the 80s. Just absolutely love 80s films, both for their uh, commitment to do the outlandish without any fear of consequence, which I feel like was a hallmark of the time, but also because I feel like some of the greatest characters that we continually try to re- maybe not replace, but we try to reinvent come from the 80s. And it really feels like a bunch of these are right in that wheelhouse. So, yeah, I was really happy to put this list together.
And that is why our list is focused mostly on the characters, and I think it's going to be a really fun time. Now, I believe last week I went first with my bottom five.
Okay.
So I'm just going to say ladies first this week and
All right.
let you have at it.
So I'll what I'll do is I'll say who the character is and then I'll say what the movie is so that we can kind of get both, right?
Yes.
um, because it is about the who the character is, but I also want to make sure that we represent what the movie is. Okay,
Hmm.
so I'll start with my bottom five. Now, my bottom five are really not in any they're not in any order of importance. They're also not in chronological order, but they're not really in any order of importance. These are just the characters that I thought have, for me, made such a big impact, and absolutely they are iconic. Um, I've got Superman from Superman, of course, played by Christopher Reeves. I have Flash Gordon in the movie Flash Gordon, which was such a 80s great movie. I have Cobra from the movie Cobra. He was played by Sylvester Stallone. Still love that character, even though I really don't like Sylvester Stallone. Okay. I have Snake Plissken. Bet you probably don't even know who Snake Plissken is, but he is a character that played in the movie Escape from New York by Kurt Russell. And then I have, and this probably probably going to get in trouble for having this in my bottom five, but my top five is good. Luke Skywalker from Star Wars, played by Mark Hamill.
That's a pretty interesting bottom five you got there.
Yeah, I I mentioned that this was the bottom five of my list to my kid, and my kid was like, "Whoa, what is in your top five?" So that was kind of fun. That was very
I
fun.
will say I may not have seen the Escape from movies, but I do know Snake
Yeah, you know
is
Snake.
absolutely no Snake. And fun fact, uh, Metal Gear Solid Snake is named after Snake Plissken. There you go.
I mean, you just put somebody with an eye patch and give them a gun, and you immediately know, oh, that was that 80s movie. Yep, that was it.
Time for my bottom five. And some of you are going to be like, what? And, huh?
Ooh. Because it should have made your top 5 or because we
No,
just
because
won't know
they're
who
like,
these
you
people
have
are?
no idea what I'm talking about.
Those are the best.
Because, first of all, my my number 10 is, yeah, I had to put a jet pilot in, my in my list because the 80s were a time for jet pilots. So I went with everybody's favorite, Doug Masters from Iron Eagle,
Oh, yeah.
number 10. My number 9 is, I got to make sure I say this name right, Trash from 1990, The Bronx Warriors.
Oh. Hey, that's a good iconic character.
Crazy. But I standing by my list, everything on this is valid to me. So sorry, peoples. It gets a little more mainstream as time goes on. Don't worry, or at least memorable. Maybe stuff that you might still find streaming places. My number 10, 9, 8. My number 8 is Major Scott McCoy from the Delta Force.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I haven't seen that in forever.
Little Chuck Norris in there for you.
Yeah.
My number 7 is Ripley from Aliens.
Crossover.
Ooh. And my number 6, and this might catch a little bit of flack because some people don't think this is a good movie, but I do. My number 6 is James Dalton from Roadhouse.
Oh, I totally forgot that his name was Dalton. I don't know why, but
So yeah, guy rips rips another dude's throat out with his bare hands. So yeah,
uh,
and
that was
karate kicks
crazy.
everybody. Just karate kicks everybody.
Yeah, that was a
So, yeah,
crazy movie. Did you see the remake of Roadhouse?
I have not, but I plan on checking it out eventually.
I was not as impressed with it as I thought I was going to be. So, but
Now,
it was, reinvention of a popular IP. Who knows where it could go?
to be perfectly honest, I've spent the last uh, yesterday and today watching 11 Marvel movies
Oh my god.
in preparation for MCU trivia.
Damn.
Um, so yeah, I actually have Ant-Man paused right now. That's number 12, and that's what I'm going to be going back to as soon as we're done. So
Nice.
yeah, that's my bottom 5. Are you ready to break us into the top 5?
Okay. So, in my top 5, I kind of wonder how much crossover we're actually going to have in here. I can see maybe one, maybe two. Well, two, one definitely. So, maybe two. Um okay, so my number 5 is none other than Indiana Jones from any Indiana Jones movie, but we'll just go with let's go with the Temple of Doom. Um I don't even know what to say about I think the original Indiana Jones was definitely amazing and stands on its own. But I feel like Temple of Doom had that kind of campy 80s style that was just so prevalent. Um, the short quips, and not even it wasn't even that that he didn't have quips before. It's just that they were so cheesy. And all the other characters were cheesy too, but they were great. I mean, they were just absolutely perfectly done. The scene with all the bugs, the scenes with the 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 oh god, the dinner scene. I can't even think about the dinner scene. Um the elephants, the bats, for goodness sakes. I mean, everything in it was just so over the top, and Indiana Jones became in my head at that moment so iconic, so I don't even know how to describe Indiana Jones because I feel like it's sort of it's so much more than just like he's a this or he's a that. I mean, he's like the Western star of every action film, but he's so much more than that. He's an archaeologist, he's a professor, he's, uh, a ladies' man. He's also super nice to people. He's also really mean to people. He also, I don't know, just everything about Indy just gives me he was such a great rogue character, you know? Like you give him basically anything to do and he can figure it out. Um I don't, and one of my kids actually said that Indiana Jones was the MacGyver of action heroes. And I feel like that's kind of like exactly the way I think of him. So Indiana Jones gets my number five choice, played by the wonderful Harrison Ford. And I can't even imagine Indiana Jones now without Harrison Ford being that person.
Not even Tom Selleck.
I mean, no, no,
Okay, that's fine. By the way, that is some crossover too.
no. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So we have at least two.
at three actually, because my number five is Luke Skywalker.
Luke.
I chose specifically Return of the Jedi because the black clothes, just totally owning the fact that he is by default the greatest living Jedi, and going in there and owning everything and everybody because he's no longer the little guy from the moisture farm anymore. He's seen some stuff.
The moisture farm. I just love that. Sorry.
Had his hand cut off. Found out about his unfortunate, even though there was a guy there that could have told him the whole time. A couple of droids too. Uh, hey, can you answer some questions about my dad? Yeah, R2, 3PO. You can tell me Obi-Wan. You can tell me what I need to know about my dad, and all of them just nope, nope. I'm not gonna. No. You think they like met to the side sometimes while Luke was sleeping? They're like, "Hey, should we tell him? Should we tell him about his dad? What about his sister? Should we tell him about that?" And somehow they all come to the same conclusion. No, no. And then of course the kiss. It's like, maybe we should have said something. No, it's too late now. We can't say anything. We cannot say a word to that boy now because he already kissed her. So yeah, just I get this feeling that at the very least R2 and Obi-Wan, you know what? I'm just gonna say R2 and 3PO. They're like R2's like, we probably should have said something.
Although, okay, so let's be totally honest, okay? Because this is important, just for posterity's sake. Star Wars was actually 1977,
Yes.
and um, let's see. So Star Wars was 77. Return of the Jedi was 83. Or
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
84, right? 83, 84.
83.
Okay. So that one totally absolutely counts. Um
And that's why I specifically chose Jedi for my list.
no.
But I wanted to make sure, people understood the really weird arc that he
It,
had.
he Luke Skywalker has one of the strangest character arcs that sort of is altogether. And I say that lovingly, of course, because I absolutely, I chose Luke Skywalker too. Um but what started out as a sort of standard hero's journey became one of the most convoluted and complicated characters that I can think of in sort of modern media telling. I- Luke Skywalker doesn't just have history uh and the main character syndrome of all. Luke Skywalker also has this sort of mythic quality to him where he basically becomes a god before he actually dies. And that's pretty astounding. I mean, he definitely gets to the quality of, or he gets to the status of, you know, he walks among the gods. That's pretty crazy. That's pretty crazy.
So that's why Luke Skywalker, Return of the Jedi is my number 5.
Nice. Very good choice. All right, my number 4 is now this movie is actually getting remade, and I have to say I'm actually pretty excited about it. I'm not super excited about the guy who's playing him, but okay, we'll deal with it. Because I'm sure that he's going to do a great job. I know he's going to put 150% into making this character this character. I
So curious.
just don't particularly love this particular actor all the time because sometimes it's kind of hit and miss with him. I don't know, whatever. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but um, I'm sure he's going to do a great job. Okay, so in the 1980s, there was a series of films that um, basically dealt with immortality. And I, for some reason, in the 80s, immortality was one of those topics that a lot of movies touched on in really odd, crazy ways, right? But this particular franchise of films made this immortality theme so incredibly central to the both the plot lines and to the characters that they basically kept writing themselves into corners because they would give immortality to the characters, but then they came up with creative ways for them to die, and then they also would like take immortality away but then have to give it back. Like, it was really sort of a crazy piece. There was also, this is one of the few movie franchises that ever did a movie with the people or the main character that was in a series of the same title. So that also makes it super odd and crazy. But the character that I'm thinking of is Connor McLeod. Connor McLeod of the Clan McLeod in the movie Highlander. And the Highlander movies, it feels like they were so long ago now. But the Highlander movies, in creating Connor McLeod, created kind of like Luke Skywalker, created this sort of mythic hero that had so many interesting quirks, so many twists and turns, so many weird associations with the world that he lives in, that it's hard not to see him as just a larger than life action hero. Um, I particularly love the lore behind Highlander. There's some printed material behind Highlander, which is great, but just the movie lore, they kept having to retcon things because it wouldn't quite work. They put them in the future. They had this, okay, well, that was the battle for all the immortals, but oh, check it out. There's like a box of unopened immortals over here that we missed. So now there's more. Um I mean, it seems silly, but it was so good. It was so so good. And I kind of like the way that they tried to pull all the strings together rather than just like make them all, okay, well, this movie doesn't matter or this movie doesn't matter. That's not canon. That's not. They just really tried to stitch everything together like crazy people with, a sewing machine and a bunch of unrelated fabric and said, we're just going to go for it. So Connor McLeod from the Clan McLeod from Highlander gets my number 4 choice. And I'm assuming that you know what Highlander is, right?
I know what Highlander is. I haven't seen Highlander movies since I was probably like 9 years old.
Yeah. It's old. I know it's old. I
The
mean, the
only
original
thing,
Highlander was like mid 80s, I think.
and the only thing I remember because my dad rented it. Um, we were living in Alaska, I believe it was, and it's Lambert, right? He's in that.
Yeah, Christopher Lambert and Sean Connery.
I remember very vividly one scene where they're in a truck driving into this place, and it was getting shot up. And after they get through, they're comparing bullet holes. Like I got shot this many times. Well, I got shot this many times, something like that.
Was that a second Highlander? That wasn't the first Highlander.
And I don't know. Like I said, I was like 9 years old. I don't remember it all too well, but that one scene stands out.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
So
I
yeah,
mean,
excellent choice for
uh,
that.
the whole idea behind Highlander is so absolutely bonkers. I mean, it's like the Highlander 2 is basically like he's living in the future when the world is basically protected by this big giant bubble. It's like a solar radiation bubble or something, and people have to, pay for things, kind of like well, there's another sci-fi movie that's kind of like this, but it has it's kind of like it definitely has that sci-fi theme that goes along with it, where big business is basically, controlling things like charging for the basic human necessities, water, air, whatever. And um and all of that was like the setup for bringing more immortals back. And it just sort of like, I mean, it was crazy. It just absolutely didn't make any sense at all, but it was still such a fun movie. So, yeah, I'm not complaining. I'm just not complaining.
Well, let's hope that whatever they do with uh, the legacy of that is
Oh yeah,
done with the same heart.
do you want to know who they're rebooting it with?
Let me see if I can guess.
I mean, it's only a Google search away, but
Yeah, but then where's the fun in that?
it's true. It's true.
Okay, is Liam Neeson involved in any way?
No, but damn, that would be so epic. I could see Liam Neeson as Ramirez.
I could as well. Let's see. Let's see. New Highlander movie. Let's see. I'm going basically off of, you know, really vague memories.
It's not easy. I mean, honestly, look, if you were going to put anybody into the Highlander role, I kind of feel like you should put Jason Momoa in that role, because he's just got all that raw energy, but he can hide it really well too. But whatever, that didn't happen. So,
I'll go with John Cena.
oh, that would have been an interesting choice too. But no, it's
Terrible choice.
Henry Cavill.
That is interesting.
Yeah, it's Henry Cavill. Henry
Oh,
Cavill is the guy who's going to play Connor McLeod. And I don't. I know that they cast the guy who is kind of the big bad guy. Um, he he's the one that really sort of makes the movie scary. And yeah, I absolutely love him. He's just absolutely amazing. But there there's so little to be said about this movie. Like, they've kept it under such wraps that it's hard to find information on it. Kurgan is the guy's name. That's the big bad guy's name. There's so little information on it. Like, you know who the writers are, you know the executive producers are, but there isn't a lot of information on the full cast. which is really interesting at this point because it feels like that should be very much already out there, you know?
Yeah, especially amongst the for lack of a better term, the nerdites, the ones that were all over. You see, the real reason Cavill's not really going to go back to Superman is because he landed on Warhammer, and that's one of his lifelong passions is the Warhammer. But no,
Yeah, and
not a
then
word.
where's Warhammer? There is, as far as I know, unless is that an Amazon thing? I I don't think so though.
Let's see. Like we keep saying, information is only a Google search away. For 30 years, I've dreamed. Amazon Studios has secured Warhammer, and Henry Cavill is
Hey,
attached.
hey, see, I was right. It was Amazon. I had a feeling. In fact, the only person that has been announced. Well, actually, there is an announcement for the big bad guy, but it's not on IMDb yet. The only person that is announced on the IMDb page for Highlander, the remake, is Henry Cavill. He's the only big. That's the only big star that's attached. There's the screenplay credits. There's the music. There's the couple additional crew people. There's the artist. There is nothing on the actors. Nothing. That's crazy. I personally think. I just think that is so crazy.
Who wants to live forever?
Yeah,
Me.
and that's the
I do.
that's the that's the other thing. I wonder if they will use the original Queen soundtrack or if they will have to soundtrack it separately. Because part of what made Highlander so great, other than Connor McLeod from the Clan McLeod, was that insane Queen music that ran all the way through. I mean, I can't hear the song Hammer to Fall without thinking of Kurgan driving the car through the streets of New York with the poor little old lady in the passenger seat and him trying to scare her to death. Like it's just such an iconic soundtrack. So I don't know. I'm interested. They've got my interest, that's for sure. And I'm sorry that we
Probably do
wasted
it.
so much time on this, but I'm excited about it. I'm definitely excited.
The new Highlander soundtrack provided by My Chemical Romance.
Oh God, no. Okay, I mean, I guess. I mean, I'd
I
take
know. I
Fallout
love
Boy.
me some MCR.
Well, let's do Fallout Boy for this one.
I listen to Patrick Stumford, the phone book.
I mean, I guess it would be better, and this is in no way meant to diss Taylor Swift because I love Taylor Swift, but I would not suggest having Taylor Swift as the iconic music soundtrack for Highlander. I don't think that's going to work. Although, perhaps at the moment that they get their head chopped off, you could perhaps put in the song We're Never Getting Back Together. That could work. Sorry. I realize that was way
Get
hokeyer
out.
than it should have been.
Get out.
So moving right along, Josh, what's your number 4? I'm really
Mine
interested now.
mine mine number 4 is barely eking by in the time allotted as far as movie title goes that I chose. But this character is so iconic that when the torch for adventures tried to be passed along to a son, the fan base said no.
Oh no.
They killed off that character and gave him his hat back. I'm
Oh
talking
no.
about Indiana Jones.
Ah. Uh,
They're like, "Oh, you really hate Mutt, huh?" Well, guess what, kids? He died in Vietnam. Like,
poor
oh
Indy.
wow,
Poor
this guy's
Indy.
been through some stuff. But that's what happened recently in Indiana Jones. Uh, we're talking the movie specifically, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. even though, like Jen said, you can pick any Indiana Jones movie from the '80s, and you're like golden, except Temple. Anyway, what can I say? Indiana Jones is best when punching Nazis. That's my
I
opinion.
actually agree. I actually agree.
And I
Yeah.
don't really know how to expand on that other than he was and is, I guess, kind of a Renaissance man for the time. He's educated college professor, and he's not afraid to get into a scrap when needed. And as most important asset isn't the whip, and it's not the gun. It's his mind, which he uses quite frequently to get out of scrapes. Um, and what can I say? Uh, no ticket, right?
No ticket.
Everyone's like, did you just punch him and threw him out of the Zeppelin? It's like, no ticket. Oh, yeah, that tracks. Okay. And not a fuss was made. Um, Indiana Jones is truly an iconic hero that would be hard to top on any list, unless it's a list of basically iconic '80s action heroes. The only reason he is as far down as he is at number 4 is because I had to draw a line somewhere about the action versus adventure ratios of the films on my list. And admittedly, maybe there's a bit more adventure than action, and that's not a bad thing by any means as far as loving movies. But I just thought, as to the nature of this particular list where we're talking about actiony action heroes, I was like, yeah, he gets into some scrapes, but it's more about the adventure. That's why he is my number 4 and not like instantly like right up there at the top of the list, even though he is like one of my favorite characters ever. I watched and liked Dial of Destiny. So that should tell you everything you need to know. Indiana Jones, my number 4.
Nice. And I'd say that even if I hadn't put Indy on my list. So okay, well, we already heard a little bit about my number 3 choice because Josh picked Ripley for
I'm such a
his
jerk.
I forgot which position that was in, but in his bottom 5 Ripley was there. I actually have Ripley much higher on my list from Aliens because one, I feel like action heroes don't have enough female representation. That's just sort of a thing. But two, as an actual action person, Ripley takes the cake. I mean, Ripley does things that grown men are afraid to do, that grown Marines are afraid to do. Ripley doesn't just take on aliens, Ripley takes on the system, which in some ways is perhaps even more scary than any monster out there, or maybe that is the monster. Um, I one of the few things that I can remember about the first time that I saw Aliens was being absolutely impressed with Ripley, not just her ultimate protection mechanism or her ultimate protection mode, I should say, not mechanism, um, but the way that this particular character went about making her choices. Because if there's anything to be sort of gleaned from this list, it's that all of these action heroes, they all have a different process for figuring out what it is that they need to do and why they need to do it. I mean, their motivations are so all over the place. I mean, Indy's motivation is far different from Connor McLeod's motivation, and Ripley's motivation is so incredibly um I guess at the same time that it's streamlined, it's also so over the top. Like she just is kind of like personally, I feel like if Ripley and you were standing in the same room and something bad was happening, I can't think of a person other than maybe one other person on my list that I'd want to be with me, because Ripley also has compassion. Ripley has this sense of people that also like gives you hope. It's not I feel like Ripley is not just the jerky kind of action hero, which a lot of action heroes tend to be, and they kind of get away with it because they can. Ripley cares. And I just remember thinking, "Oh my god, this is just the coolest character I've ever seen." So, I'm going to go with Ripley as my number 3 choice in the movie Aliens. And I know that you've seen Aliens, Josh, because
I
I know
have,
we've talked
yes.
about it. It's one of my James Cameron favorites. I feel like James Cameron did such a good job with Aliens. I mean, it's one of the reasons that I'll basically watch anything by James Cameron. Well, that and The Abyss, but
And to
as a
think he's
movie,
dedicating the rest of his life to blue people.
I mean, okay, I guess.
That's my least. I mean, I've never seen Avatar movies. I again have no intention of seeing Avatar movies. But the fact that he's
I can't
like,
believe you've never seen them. That's sort of surprising.
I've seen Ferngully. Anyway,
Yeah, it is kind of the live action version of Ferngully.
it's a cartoon, Jen. It's a cartoon.
A little bit less, a little bit less cool though because there's no baddie. So yeah.
How many people do you see? Isn't everyone just CGI motion capture?
No, there's people in Avatar.
See, like I said, I haven't seen it, but
Yeah, there's definitely people in Avatar. They're not nice people, but there's people in Avatar.
the thing is, James Cameron is such a legendary director, right?
True.
Uh, like you said, Aliens, The Abyss. You got some Terminator movies in there, and something about a boat. There was a boat movie, I think.
Oh yeah, what was that? Oh yeah, Iceberg Ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. And to think that, oh, now my life is only going to be this one franchise, and I will never make another movie outside of it again. It's like, oh, that makes me so sad.
I would be sadder about it if I didn't sort of realize that in James Cameron's pursuit of the Navi, he creates um movie technology, cinematic technology that everybody else in the industry benefits from. I mean, like he actually invents new cinematic techniques, new cinematic processes that once his movies come out, everybody else in the industry is like, oh, we got to try this. So but in if you're going to do something and you're adding to the rest of the world's shared experience, okay, you can have that. I'm good.
Okay.
I mean, seriously, think about what he's brought to the table for Avatar. Well, and I know you didn't see it, but he we did the same thing with the Abyss. I mean, he created whole new technologies for whatever it was that he wanted to film. And that is like, I mean, that's not just thinking outside the box. That's like reinventing the box. That's crazy. That's so crazy.
Still want to see something else from him other than Blue People movies.
I I mean, he's 69 years old by the time Avatar 4 comes out, which apparently they've already shot most of. Uh I don't know. But on the other hand, Ridley Scott is still somehow going strong. George Miller is still somehow going strong, and those people are well into their 70s. So who knows?
Coppola.
It could be amazing. You just never freaking know. I don't judge people by their age anymore. Not when it comes to, I mean, you know, I do belong to the Democratic Party, so there is that. But I mean, overall, from the standpoint of what these people have to contribute to the world of cinema, I don't judge people by their age at all, because some of the best ideas, some of the best techniques come from people that are able to see both back, into old school movie making, and make the best of current technology and blend them together in a way that is just like, whoa, it's crazy. And what we're able to do now with green screen is a little bit insane. I mean, we've come so far from the early, oh, hey, I mean, we've come so far from just what I thought was great green screen with the Lord of the Rings. And now we're worlds and worlds and worlds ahead of that technology. So, yeah, you got to give James Cameron a bit of a pat on the back for that. I do.
Always going to pat him on the back for his accomplishments. That's why I wish he would, at least make
Do more.
one more, great movie that's not associated with like any of his previous IPs. I want um, a great original movie from James Cameron, and I know that could be asking for a bit much, but yeah. And as far as ages of filmmakers, uh, the only person I think that may have lost a step over the years, and this is just me, maybe Scorsese.
Yeah, I kind of do. Well, I don't know if he's lost a step in terms of his movie making prowess as much as I feel like he has lost touch with his audiences. I mean, because technically, I think his movies are brilliant. From a technical standpoint, they still absolutely shine. But I don't think that the audiences quite connect with the material anymore.
It's very
Um,
long-winded these days.
yeah, and that's sort of, yeah, and he also seems kind of gripey, like, you know, get off my lawn kind of person, which I don't know. That just never bodes well.
I'm all for like a 3+ hour movie. Uh, I hope that's not the impression that I'm giving out. But if I'm going to be sitting, in one spot for that long, I want it to pull me forward and not me like
Right.
reaching as hard as I can for the next bit of story, next element to go. This is interesting, right? This is
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. When I was in college, I used to have a friend. We used to go to the Met in New York City, right? And we would walk down the very long corridors with old artwork. Some of them were more iconic than others. And my friend used to say, I'm just going to pretend to be interested because I'm not smart enough to know what is what here. And sometimes I feel like that's how people feel when they watch a Scorsese movie. I'm just going to pretend that I'm interested because I'm sure everybody else is. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm there for a ride. Not, I don't want to have to do half the work.
Well, let me ask you this, just since we're on the topic of James Cameron. What movie can you think of that you would love for him to do that perhaps wasn't necessarily an original IP, because maybe that's a little bit too much at the moment, but what movie could you see him directing that you'd just be like, "Oh my god, I would go see that no matter what."
A movie that I would like from an established IP,
Yeah, I
essentially.
guess that would have to be. Yeah.
Let's see. You know what? I could see James Cameron being attached to uh, I'm gonna go with the world of gaming and say StarCraft.
Oh, that could be an interesting one.
I mean, it's got space marines, it's got aliens, and all sorts of weird, cool stuff. It would be kind of a mixture of like everything that his career has been. You know, taking elements of the Abyss and Terminator, even Avatar. Uh, Maybe not so much of the Iceberg movie, but if you could get that kind of scale for StarCraft, I would be 100% on board with that as like a James Cameron swan song, giving us essentially what could be the greatest game based movie ever.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's my pick.
I would love to see James Cameron do um a Star Trek movie. That
That
would be my pick.
that's ambitious.
I mean, I'm still holding out hope. I have plenty of optimism left that Star Trek has not run its course. That there's still plenty of goodness left in the franchise to boot, reboot, whatever. And who else but James Cameron could dig so deep, excuse me, into the sci-fi vaults and pull something out that could be amazing. That's just me though.
Uh, uh, Film by James Cameron, um, and I don't know, because I one love the idea of James Cameron and Star Trek going together. That it would look beautiful and it would be an epic story. I really like that idea. Um, but as far as Star Trek being Star Trek, it had Star Trek's so weird because the most Star Trek show that has been produced, I think, in the last 20 years is probably the Orville, right?
No,
That
you know,
show.
I kind of disagree. I actually think that Strange New World is probably the closest to the real Star Trek that we've had that doesn't go over, weird boundary lines. That it actually works.
I haven't watched Strange New World yet. What
Oh,
I stopped at Discovery because if you recall, I was on like this really weird bender for Star Trek, starting from the
yes.
original series, all the movies, and then I got to Discovery, and I'm like, I need a break. I need a break, and I
Discovery
haven't
is
gone back to it.
Discovery is probably one of my least favorite uh of the yeah, it's one of them. It's not the worst, but it's one of them. It's I didn't really like it, but I really do like Strange New Worlds. It's I don't know, something happened with both the writing and honestly the acting too that just sort of brings this in a way that is both nostalgic but also it feels like a show looking forward, which is what I always felt like Star Trek was, a show looking forward. Like, look, we're reaching into the sci-fi aspect of what we're doing, but we never ever ever forget that this is human drama, and we're relating to the human drama in the vacuum of space. um so yeah, I mean, I just feel like they get it right somehow. I'm not to say that the Orville doesn't, it doesn't. To me, the Orville feels like an alternate universe, um, like a real alternate universe. Like, oh, well, there was Star Trek, and then there was this thing over here that's the Orville, and you can tell that it's a love letter to Star Trek, but it's a love letter to Star Trek. It doesn't have that same, doesn't quite capture the same uh nostalgia feel for me that Star Trek does. It does something a little bit different. But I mean, I'm one of those people that's super sad that there is no more Orville. I mean, I just wish that they would figure out a way to get it back because it was so good.
You know when it does that the new Star Trek doesn't?
What's up?
Lighting.
Mm,
It has lights on the ship, and you can see people.
true enough.
And carpeting. Remember when ships had carpeting?
That's always weird to me. That's always weird to me.
But it was
Like in the
part of
future,
the
I can't
show.
imagine they have carpeting. Why would you have carpeting in the future?
Comfort.
Um, yeah, but it's so not. I don't know. Okay, maybe a hologram of carpeting that could work.
So my number three.
Great segue there. Yes, your
Uh,
number three.
my number three is sorry. My number three is about an action star that is so cool and so iconic. They named the movie's theme song after him.
Ooh.
That's right. I'm talking about Axel Foley
Ah,
from
I knew you were going to pick this.
Beverly Hills Cop series, which, by the way, fourth one, Beverly Hills Cop 4, Axel F. Just came out a few weeks ago. And yeah, I will say that watching it did influence picking this list to do. But when it comes to 80s cop movies, it doesn't get much more fun and action backed than watching Axel Foley not only deceive the bad guy with his you know crucial fighting and shooting, but also with quick wit and humor, always finding a way to just really make the bad guy mad and do the do the stereotypical bad guy thing where they lose their cool and then make mistakes, because that's what Axel does. He's going to get inside your head and kind of make you do what's the term in baseball? Unforced errors.
Hmm.
It's not so much he's just going to come in, start swinging, and kick your butt, and he'll get his shots in, sure, but no, he makes you make the mistake, and much like Indiana Jones, uh, it's the way he's outsmarting everybody, and not only that, he's making them underestimate him by making them think he's not as smart as he actually is. And that's not just the bad guys, too. It also goes with the people he calls his friends.
Oh my god.
His friends continuously underestimate him. That's why he's able to, do things like shove a banana in a tailpipe. And that's not a euphemism, just so you know. Axel Foley is one of the funniest action heroes, even today, with the new Beverly Hills Cop, which I'm not going to say it's my favorite. It's even it's the worst of the movies. I will say that, but I still enjoyed it because Axel Foley is just such a fun character to watch all the time, and Eddie Murphy does a tremendous job of bringing this guy to life. And some of you out there will say, yes, and well, it's just Eddie Murphy being Eddie Murphy, like in all of his movies. And yes, but with the context of or with the added benefits of a guy like Judge Reinhold, being right there with him, or what's his face, Paul Reiser, to play off of. Uh,
Who was
Always
also in Aliens, by the way.
also in Aliens. So maybe this secretly turned into a Paul Reiser list, and we'll just end with playing the theme from Mad About You. No, we won't be doing that. But it's not just Axel. It's not just Eddie Murphy, being Eddie Murphy. It's the fact that this character has these kinds of interactions with the characters around him that makes him just so much fun to watch, and that is why uh, Axel Foley is my number three.
Nice. Um. All right. let's see. My number. Okay, I'm at number two. Oh, thanks. I am at number two, and my number two is okay. Oh boy. My number two sort of needs no actual introduction. I mean, the name of this character kind of says it all. Um, and I, good lord, I feel like my very first um action hero crush, like really action hero, like or like, well, not really action hero, like my first real crush, um the kind of crush that's like, um like you could totally think that, oh yeah, that's the guy that I'm gonna grow up and marry or something, even though it was pretty ridiculous, and obviously, yeah, I had strange ideas, but what can I say? Um, Also, I have to also say that this movie, because it is actually the second of a series, and I hadn't seen the original in the series. I don't think anybody in the US had seen the original in the series until after this movie was released in the US. Um, and it was quite a different movie. Even though it was done by the same person, it was definitely a very different movie. And as such, I didn't really like it as much because I felt like the lead character wasn't exactly the lead character that we see later in the franchise, which would be the sequel and subsequently the name of this particular character. Okay, so the name of this character is Mad Max. And Mad Max was in a movie called The Road Warrior. He was also in a movie called Mad Max. But that was the original. The sequel was called The Road Warrior, and The Road Warrior stars Mel Gibson, um, who also grew up and got very grumpy. Poor guy. I feel bad for him. No, not really, but whatever. When he was young, and doing things like being the Road Warrior, uh, it was pretty incredible. And I don't know how much of the stunt work he did of his own, but however they did that, whatever kind of movie magic they used, you could tell that a lot of the stunt work was done in real time, that this wasn't special effects, that it was absolutely practical, on set stuff. And it was it was incredible. The amount of action that is in the Road Warrior rivals a lot of movies today. I mean, movies try to achieve this level, and yeah, they kind of don't. And up until I saw Furiosa, which is sort of the extension of the Mad Max um, saga, um, I honestly, I couldn't have imagined anybody else in the Mad Max role other than Mel Gibson. I have to say that Tom Hardy did a great job. I mean, that was fabulous. Um, but there's something about the original Mad Max which is, it just sort of defies logic, the amount of things that he is able to do. As an action hero, he's not just physical, which is always kind of a part of it. He also has an incredible amount of, okay, I see how this is going to work. Here's what we're going to do. And that really serves him. So I don't know what I can really say about the Road Warrior. That it, like, either hasn't been said. It's such an old movie. I mean, if you haven't seen the Road Warrior, but you saw not Furiosa, but you saw Mad Max, the the basically the Mad Max movie by George Miller that came out a couple of years ago, that was sort of like the re-franchising of Mad Max. It's definitely worth it to go back and watch the 1981, I think, version of this movie. It's different. It's not what you see in Mad Max, that is sort of like the George Miller, okay, I finally have everything that I ever wanted. Now I'm actually going to tell this story in a much bigger scale. But it's an amazingly tight story that is kind of incredible. I mean, just the development of the story is really, really good. And it's got just a concise beginning, middle, and end that work so well. And again, from an iconic standpoint, I can't think of an action hero who is, in my mind, bigger than Mad Max. And yeah, partly that's just because I had a massive crush on him. But yeah, so Mad Max gets my number two choice for the Road Warrior.
If only I could think of other movies that had such a drastic, you know, change from the between the first and the second. It's
Whew.
like completely different everything.
Yeah. Have you seen the original Mad Max?
I have, yeah.
And it doesn't comport. It's almost like George Miller woke up one day and said, "You know what? I got an idea. Let's really make this post-apocalyptic." Um and then wrote into it all the things that he couldn't or didn't write into Mad Max. Um, and it, because if you watch Mad Max with Tom Hardy in it, and then you watch Mad Max from 1981, um, you can tell that it's along the same lines. The movie is about the same kind of source material, right? Even
Hmm.
Immortum Joe is kind of represented. Um, the they're on bikes. It's just a little bit different because there's not as there's less variety of things happening. Um, but you can tell that it's like basically okay. This came from the George Miller mind. It totally works. But you go back and you watch the original Mad Max, and you're like, wait a minute, what is this? Like, who is this person? It really is strange. It's a very, very, it's almost like that was the tale of personal violence, and Road Warrior is the tale of violence made personal. Um, and yeah, it definitely feels very weird. But as far as being an iconic 80s film, everybody who grew up in the 80s knew this film, and even the people that were too young to watch it were like, yeah, okay, we're going to find a way to watch it.
Even as a tiny, tiny child, I understood that Tina Turner was in Thunderdome.
See, I'll tell you a weird, this once again, this super dates how old I am, so just bear with me while I grab my cane and walk down memory lane here for a second. um One of the very first movies that we were ever able to watch on VHS, because we couldn't afford to buy a video player, but you could rent them. And for nights when your mom and your dad were out, and it was babysitter night, that's what would happen. We would rent a video player and then get movies. And it's one of the very first movies that we ever watched on VHS, because no person in their right mind was ever going to take me to see that movie while it was in theaters. I mean, but on VHS, even on the small screen, it had such a huge impact on me. So yeah, that was big. That was super big.
I wonder how many other franchises have made such drastic changes between films.
I don't, that's a good, yeah. That would be a really good. I don't know. I'm not sure if I could come up with a list of 10. I probably could, but boy, that's a tough one. Because even the original Alien still kept enough in common with Aliens that I recognize it both as the same film, and it kind of has the same tonality. Like it didn't, it's still Giger who's in charge of the artwork. Like, it doesn't fundamentally change the entire story. Um so, yeah, I'd have to really think about that, but I'm sure we could come up with some.
But can we come up with 10?
I don't know. Maybe
That'd be a tough one. So
it would be.
that would be more long term homework. Like
Yeah.
it'll take us some time to figure that out.
Yeah, that is but that's a good one to think about though. Definitely. So
But now
you
that
are at number 2.
right number two, it's funny we mentioned there's a bit of a change in my number two between the first movie and the second one because much like Mad Max, I think this character is much more identifiable by the sequels rather than the original.
Hmm.
Um, and it doesn't take as drastic a turn uh, between first and second movies as the Mad Max movies, but I will say it does take a bit of a turn, a detour in sort of style and motivation, maybe theme. Um, my number two, 1980s action hero, is the star of is the titular character, John Rambo.
Oh, good one. See, I, I chose Cobra, but I could have easily chosen Rambo too because Sylvester Stallone's iconic characters are just exactly that. They are absolutely iconic. So,
Very much so.
yeah, I
And
agree.
like we were just talking about, between first and second movies, because everyone thinks when Rambo's thought about now, it's he's fighting in the jungle, he's killing as many bad guys as possible. That's Rambo. Big knife, big guns, just seeking and destroying everything, accomplishing his mission, whatever the case may be. But
Right.
the first movie,
They were just trying
first,
to kick him out of town.
yeah, it's just the cops were like, "You veteran, we don't want you in these parts because you're just a meandering vagrant." And he's like, I just want to walk through town. That's all I want to do. And the, the cops just try so hard, to get rid of him, as it were. I mean, if this is the type of thing that if it happened today, and he's walking through town, someone would like run up with their phone and be like, "I'm recording all of this. You're going to get a whole lot of money from the state. You're golden, Rambo. You're golden."
Hmm.
Um, but back then, no, the cops, they did what they want. I mean, they still do what they want, but and in particular, this town, they're just going to do whatever they want. And if they don't want you there, well, guess what? They're going to get rid of you. And literally, all he was doing was walking through town to get to the other side. That's it. Just walking. And turns out, yeah, they might have messed with the wrong guy because next thing they're going after him and he winds up killing a bunch of them. And, we find out, yeah, dude's, totally a super soldier. He's really good at killing people, and that's literally all he knows how to do. So that's what he does. And in the subsequent movies, he gets brought back by the colonel. Is the colonel, right? To go on missions once again to take care of enemies of the United States. But I chose the first movie specifically, even though yes, he's more iconic in an action sense, and quite frankly, the subsequent movies are a lot more action centric. It's in the first movie that you have this story of a veteran from war that has the one particular skill set that just doesn't really have any place in the world, and it's how the world is accepting of him, and sometimes how it's not. uh, and in the wake of his arrival in this town, there are bodies everywhere. because they just wouldn't wouldn't let him wouldn't let him pass through without incident. John Rambo is arguably the one of the most iconic action names of all time, right up there with anybody else you can think of, and Stallone himself, right up there with these iconic names, like Jen said, Cobra. That's another really good example. But even going beyond the '80s and into the '90s, you got John Spartan, another great action hero. But it all stems. Well, some might say it stems from Rocky, but that's not action. That's sports. But John Rambo. Sorry, I had a message that I had to look at. John Rambo is the sort of the foundation for what would become the muscly, sweaty, or as Vince McMahon, likes to say, brick sweaty men. The action archetype that many more big sweaty guys with big muscles would follow in the future. And it all begins here. And it all begins with a simple stroll through town. I could have gone with, like I said, any number of different characters. And then, quite frankly, there's a couple of people that I'm even myself surprised to not make my 1980s action heroes list. But John Rambo absolutely deserves not only a spot on the list, but a top 2 spot. And it made him my number 2.
I feel like in in years to come, it'd be interesting to parallel this list with who we think like in the current day actually works, because I feel like retrospectively when you look at things, they look a whole lot different than they do in the moment. So yeah, that would be interesting. Well, do you want to know what my number 1 is?
No, I'm good. We can just go
Okay.
ahead and Joe.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, it's been great, everybody. I I have a feeling that this person must have made your list. I just maybe think that it made your list differently, or maybe just didn't make the list. I don't know.
You
But
know what?
I had
Before you go on,
yeah,
I do want to say, we're both, have our final spots that we need to read, and I'm noticing so many different names that have not come up at all. Not only
yeah,
just character names, but actor names. Some people that have, absolutely made their whole identity in the '80s doing action movies. Uh,
right.
and
We don't have
we
any
have
James Bond on our list.
no James Bond. And I was tempted, but still, I was like, I mean, no. But I'd say maybe after we're done with our list, we go, not so much as honorable mentions, but like where we're like, we should have just a very brief discussion of this person didn't make the list, and it seems weird that this person didn't make the list. So if you'd like to do that, after our number ones.
That's a good idea. I mean, there's a bunch of people that didn't make my list that I thought probably should have made the list, and I'll explain that in a second. But I'll give you my number 1. My number
Number
1
one.
is Conan the Barbarian, as played by Arnold Schwarzenegger and I actually chose um Conan. Oh God. Okay, now I didn't write this movie down, and now I'm totally gonna pay for that. It's not the original Conan the Barbarian. It's Conan the Destroyer. There we go. Conan the Destroyer. Um, I chose that movie because once again, I feel like it was sufficiently '80s silly enough to really capture the 80s in a way that even James Earl Jones as the Snake Master couldn't quite do. Um, I mean, it's silly, it's quippy, it's kind of fantastical. It's got some fairly bad CGI in it, but it's so fun. And Arnold, other than his role in well, okay, let me go through a couple things here. I chose Arnold for Conan the Barbarian because I just happen to love Conan the Barbarian so much as a character. Conan is one of my favorite characters in sort of short story literature. I love that whole universe. It's just super cool. But I feel like I could have chosen Predator. I could have chosen Commando. I could have chosen The Terminator. They all would have been perfect. And Arnold as the bad guy in all of those movies except for basically Commando. Well, no, actually, I think he was. I mean, he was acting on the side of good, trying to rescue his kid, but still, it still felt like he's still the big bad action hero. It could you could just interchange almost any '80s Arnold movie and say yeah, this character is just super iconic for the 80s action hero piece. I mean, I think if I'm not mistaken, kind of the only movie that doesn't and it doesn't fit into the time frame, so it can't work. But the only movie where Arnold Schwarzenegger is more of an action hero is basically in his iconic role called The Last Action Hero. But that was 1990 something. It was like early 90s. So that one can't work for the 80s. But almost any other movie, just sort of you can pick up Arnold, stick him in there and go, "Yep, he's the big bad guy." Um, in terms of being typecast, it just works so perfectly. So I chose Conan the Destroyer. One, I don't know how you don't love this movie. Grace Slick was unbelievably phenomenal in this movie. It had all of the sort of lost and wayward D&D components in it before people were really paying attention to what D&D actually was. And it's written Conan the Destroyer is is I mean basically um it's a different kind of take on Conan the Barbarian because Conan the Barbarian um the source material for Conan was, let's see, who wrote that. I want to say I know who wrote this. Robert, oh man, okay, I'm going to get stuck here. Um Robert Howard is the person who wrote the original Conan, but the story as it kind of made its way through media was just sort of, I don't know, changed by this guy named Stanley Mann who really gave Conan some iconic presence, I guess is maybe a good way to say it. And it worked so well. Like it actually took the character that was supposed to be Conan the Barbarian and gave him all of these different little aspects, all of these different quirks of personality. And it was great. I mean, it just really, really, really worked. And then when you look forward, and you see how many franchises tried to not reboot Conan, but reboot the kind of Conan action hero. It's a huge list. It's an enormous list. Everybody wanted to have a Conan-like character in their fantasy movie. And I feel like he really was a trendsetter, both the character and Arnold, because I almost can't even separate them at this point. They almost feel like you can't have Conan the Barbarian without having Arnold. Um, I will say that the reboot of Conan the Barbarian, featuring none other than Jason Momoa, who I absolutely adore and love, and Hawaii represent. Um, but he was not Conan. It didn't work. He just didn't have Conan energy. I don't know. There's something weird about it that just didn't quite work. I'm not even sure how that happened, but anyway. My number one is Conan the Barbarian from Conan the Destroyer, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger.
That was going to be one of my notable absentees
Ooh. Oh, glad we got to it.
because I have no Arnold on my list.
Oh man, there's just so many. Like he just had so many good movies in the 80s. Dang. Just incredible. But what a breadth of films.
When I was at, excuse me, earlier, I want to say this week, but I keep remembering it's only Tuesday. And as we're recording this, it's Tuesday, I should say. Someone asked me recently, I'll put it like that, because I mentioned Commando, and they're like, "You like Commando?" I was like, "Yeah, I loved it as a kid." And like, "You watched it as a kid?" I was like, "Yeah." What did you like it as a kid? Why did you like it as a kid? I was like, "Well, I was young and it had a young Alyssa Milano and it seemed like a great fit." So yeah, I was.
Wow.
What can I say? I've had crushes for a very long time.
I just as an interesting thing about Conan the Destroyer, um this movie sort of brought together, I think, a lot of what sort of made Arnold as a character actor, what brought so much to the table. Um, he, first of all, did you know that have you ever seen Conan the Destroyer?
I have never seen a Conan movie.
Okay. So there's a scene at the very end where they basically awaken the god, and its name is Dagoth. And the god Dagoth is actually played by Andre the Giant. And
Really?
yeah, and I mean, you would not ever recognize Andre the Giant as Dagoth because he's under, 80 pounds of prosthetics, and there's no way you could see who it was. Um, but it this is sort of like, this is what reminds me of the 80s. Like there was so much iconic stuff happening, and there were so many crossover pieces, and there's so much happening that sort of like makes you go, oh. One of the hallmarks of an 80s, especially an 80s action movie, is they oftentimes tried to tone things down a lot, right? Because it was supposed to be an action movie, but they were still looking at that point. There was no PG-13. They were always looking at that point for a rated R movie as basically being a marketing kiss of death, right? If you wanted the movie to be popular, you had to get it to PG. And so they deleted in this movie um, a sex scene, which could have been odd. Uh, a virgin sacrifice, which also was kind of strange. And also, the reason I brought up Andre the Giant, the seduction of a statue. And the statue was none other than Dagoth, who was played by Andre the Giant. So, there nothing says to me the 80s more than all the behind the scenes stuff about who these people sort of were, what they were expected to do, and then how much of their work actually never made it into the movie. And it always makes me wonder, especially with Arnold movies, knowing how over the top he is, how much we never actually saw of some of his truly over the top stuff. Because I bet it's big. I bet there's a ton. So sorry, I just had to go down that little
You
jaunt.
said over the top twice, and now I feel like I have to arm wrestle.
Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, hey, there's another good one with was was that was that Arnold or was that Stallone?
Stallone
That was Stallone. Okay.
with his hat backwards.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And the truckers and the, oh gosh, yep. Yeah, that was also a fairly good action movie though. Not my
Had some good
favorite,
fights in it.
but
All right, you ready for my number one?
I'm so ready. Let's do it.
You know this actually fits. Hey Jen, you know what you should do?
What should I do?
You should come out to the coast. We'll get together, have a few laughs.
Oh, This is on my list of, hey, we never got to. So good job.
For those of you unaware of what that line was from, and if you are unaware, how did you wind up here? Honestly, maybe yippee yay mother father, because we don't swear on this show. Um, I'm talking about John McClane from Die Hard. Come on, in one of the most perfect action movies ever made, John McClane is not the studly beefcake, action hero of the 80s. He was the antithesis. He was the opposite of that. He was just a guy. He was just a cop. He wasn't super cop. He was just a cop that spent one review of this movie I saw on letterboxd.com, said that man was walking around Nakatomi Plaza barefoot like some sort of Quentin Tarantino fantasy.
That's perfect.
Didn't even have his shoes. And he's like busting up. They use the term terrorist, but I mean, let's face it, they're thieves. That's Hans Gruber and Associates are just crooks. They aren't. They don't have political motivations. They're thieves with an accent. So yeah, that's just a really weird nitpick on my part. But still, I mean, I guess that's kind of what they were trying to distract people with, so that their true intentions weren't really known, which you would see in Die Hard 3, but that's a 90s movie. The point is, John McClane does all sorts of great action stuff that you would expect in an action movie, including
great action. Yeah.
Fighting, doing a lot of shooting, falling from things, does a lot of falling, diving, can't forget the diving, and of course, possibly when it comes to 1980s action flicks, he does the thing that is probably most important to be considered a 1980s action movie stars, and that is, spit out the one-liners. It doesn't matter what your body count is in a 1980s action movie. It's gonna be big. Yeah. It doesn't matter how big you are. It doesn't matter if you even get the girl, which, by the way, maybe he started off on kind of on the rocks with his wife, separated. You don't really get the full idea that everything is perfectly okay, but you leave the movie with kind of a, I think they're going to work on things. And that's, again, when it comes to not expecting something in an action movie, because usually it's okay, the hero gets the girl, and in this case it's okay, the hero probably gets some couples counseling. It's okay, because John McClane is just a dude, and he's not even in his own jurisdiction, and he's having to, I wonder if he got paid for doing his cop job in LA. Never really thought about that before. It's like, yeah, he's doing things in the line of duty, but technically, isn't he on vacation? So then I wonder if any of the subsequent movies really address that, and I just missed it. Anyway, John McClane is, in my opinion, the greatest action star of the 1980s, not because he is quintessential 80s action star, but because he is not. That's, I think, what makes him the best. He just is not the guy that you think of when it comes to 1980s action movies. But when you realize that Die Hard, yeah, that was made in the 80s, and it was an action movie, and it is possibly the best one of all time, you sort of have to be reminded that Bruce Willis is the guy that made John McClane what he is. And that is why John McClane in Die Hard takes my top spot. Christmas movie, by the way.
Hmm.
It is a Christmas movie. It has Christmas music throughout. It's all about Christmas. He wouldn't be going there if it wasn't Christmas. And, as the Fast and the Furious movie tells us, it's about family. So yeah, he's trying to get his family back together. And in a true Christmas miracle, he gets to fight off a bunch of crooks and get his family back together, possibly. So yeah, my number one, John McClane, Die Hard.
Pretty good list, I would say. So who didn't make it on your list that you think needs a special shout out?
Well, first and foremost, I mentioned that, you know, I had a fighter pilot on my list with Doug Masters, and you know what? Maybe some people would think, hey, if you're doing like pilots, what about that Maverick guy
Mm-hmm.
from the Top Gun movie? Well, I'd say that's more of a romance than anything, and not between the characters you think. So I didn't include Maverick. Some might say Han Solo should have maybe taken the spot over Luke Skywalker. I'd say in one of those movies, he was frozen in carbonite for a long time. So didn't really get to do a whole lot of the action.
Okay, but how about Batman?
Batman.
Yeah.
Why didn't Batman? Well, I do love Tim Burton's Batman. I will say that one thing that it does lack in is action. I mean, there's fights, but quite frankly, my opinion, kind of sloppy.
Hmm.
And that's strictly because of the nature of the bat suit that he was wearing. Couldn't move his neck. So everything came off very stiff and not actiony.
Hmm.
All of the movies I chose had, I'd say, some good fluid movement in the action scenes. And that's kind of what I that's on my mind when I watch an action movie is how smooth everything is. That's why John Wick blew my mind when it was released, because you have these beautifully flowing scenes, not just in the action choreography, but it's almost like a dance between the action choreography and the cameras.
Right.
Uh, Burton's Batman seemed very staticky for as stiff as Keaton was able to move or not able to move in the Batman suit. So I get the idea of it being on an 80s action uh, iconic heroes. Batman's iconic just in general, but very specifically this one, maybe not so much. If we opened it up to more decades, more generations, maybe Nolan's Batman would have made it on there with Christian Bale, even Batfleck with because as much as I absolutely loathe watching Batman versus Superman, that warehouse scene with Batman is super dope. I was a big fan of Batfleck. But 89 Batman action, maybe not so much. And I'll give you one more. One more movie, maybe. Yeah, I'll give you one more movie. Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I throw my Kurt Russell in there. Oh, no, I'm going to give you one more because.
But I would have chosen The Thing for Kurt Russell because I definitely think that um, I definitely think that McReady is sort of like the kind of action hero, especially from a sci-fi movie, that is that instantly spawns generations of heroes exactly like him. And he's so flawed. He's so flawed. You know who that reminds me of, which
Hmm.
unironically perhaps is also another John Carpenter movie. Nada from They Live.
Mm.
Just his name, Nada, Nada.
Hmm.
You know what that's a riff on?
Uh, the Odyssey.
What what's the Spanish word for nothing?
Um,
Nada.
Bupkis. No, that's
Nada.
not.
Nada. Nada is the Spanish word for nothing. And his life is supposed to be without meaning. It's supposed to be kind of nothingless until he finds the glasses. And so, like, yeah, John Carpenter. Give it up
Well,
for John
I love
Carpenter.
the hot rod. So, um,
Um, but that's also another character that's like, God, he was so kick, 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 but he is great.
what about Frank Dux?
Frank Dux. Hmm, yeah, okay.
A little blood sport, Van Damme.
Yeah,
He's,
yeah.
but I'd say he really got like if this was a '90s version of this list, there would be some Van Damme representation. Uh,
Yeah, I think so too. I think it just kind of missed it. Um, you know who else though was absolutely amazing as an action hero in the 80s? Well, at least for this movie. Um,
Pat Morita.
which which actually is in the title. No, it was Action Jackson with
Oh,
Carl Weathers.
yeah.
I mean, like that was such a good movie. And
Carl Weathers could have easily made any of
dang,
our
Carl
lists.
Weathers was just like at the top of his game. That was so good. I really liked that movie a lot.
And
I'm
what
trying to.
about Peter Weller?
Oh,
If you want
Pete,
to throw
yeah,
some RoboCop in there,
yeah. Actually, RoboCop was definitely, I think, it fits under action hero even more than most. Because some of the our action stars don't actually qualify as being heroes as much as they qualify as being they were action, you know.
hmm
But like Chuck Norris for Missing in Action 1, 2, and 3, Invasion USA. Like you did pick Chuck Norris, but I
oh,
mean, like you could pick
yeah,
any Chuck Norris movie and it would pretty
I
much
almost went
fit.
with Invasion USA, but it was kind of a coin toss.
That was a crazy movie. That was totally crazy.
It
Yeah,
scared me as a kid.
Kurt Russell's been in a lot. In the 80s, like he was in Tango and Cash, which also had Stallone. Um, that was really good. What about Steven Seagal? How about Above the
Again,
Law?
was that the '80s?
Above the Law was the 80s, yeah.
Because I know most of his things had you know, I'm very familiar with his '90s work. Under Siege, I think probably being my initiation into Steven Seagal at the time.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, personally, I would on a '90s list for sure. He, probably in the bottom five, but uh, honestly, if we're talking about like iconic characters, I don't
Yeah,
know
it's
if
hard.
Steven Seagal would be.
Yeah, it's hard because like I think Steven Seagal is a great, actiony kind of person, but none of his characters stand out as like, oh yeah, I totally remember Forrest Taft. And well, that was in the 90s anyway, but like but Above the Law was his name was Nico. And I don't know why I remember that, but I just remember that his name was Nico.
Clint Eastwood was doing some stuff.
Oh, Clint Eastwood could also be a 70s action star too. He definitely spanned the career. He's still putting movies out.
Yeah,
I mean, Gran Torino was like that was crazy. That was crazy.
Out there's above the law. It's on like page 6.
I'm amazed at. I mean, I don't align with Clint Eastwood politically, but I am absolutely in awe of that man's career. His acting has just it hasn't just spanned decades. It's like it's superior. It's good. So much of what he has done has been absolutely amazing.
I read something about him that said the secret to making these great movies is to surround yourself with awesome people while you play golf.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Apparently that's why I suck at making movies.
I mean, I'm definitely paraphrasing, but that was sort of the gist of it. Um, do you think, say, Captain Kirk would have been a good addition?
No.
No, no. Star Trek 2, Star Trek 3, Star Trek 4.
Don't feel like Kirk is actually an action hero.
I can agree with that sentiment.
You know who I do think though we kind of missed a little bit of the mark on, just because it was the beginning of the franchise.
Hmm.
Uh, Danny Glover and Mel Gibson in Lethal Weapon.
Yeah, that's an
Because
interesting thought there.
Lethal Weapon was just that was so the action was so crazy and over the top that it actually kind of made my head hurt.
I I don't know if I would add their like what was it? Lethal Weapon 4 that had Jet Li?
Yeah, eventually I think. Was that 4? It probably was. Cuz I think that yeah, cuz the first two were pretty straightforward.
I think it was 4 that had Jet Li, and he had Jet Li did that thing where he would like just quickly take apart somebody's gun.
Right.
And I love that. At the end of the movie, uh, Riggs and Mertz are like, we can walk away now and just it's over. But I gotta know how he does that.
I I think okay, so I think maybe another person that is sort of like not represented, and probably because the movies were not like these weren't great movies, but from an action hero standpoint, they were actually really good in the I mean they were iconic of the 80s, is Miles O'Keefe.
Refresh me.
He did the Fighting Eagle. He did the movies called Ator. He did those movies. There are two of them, Fighting Eagle and Blade Master. Then he also did later. He did Ator 3, which is another one. He did one called Hell's Heroes. He made a movie called Phantom Riders. I'm sure you know who Miles O'Keefe is. Um,
If I've seen him,
and if you've seen
maybe.
him, you'd know who. Yeah, you'd know who he was. Um, he definitely had a uh, kind of a big, just in terms of the number of movies in the 80s that he was in. Oh, I know who the other one was that I forgot. Okay. And this is another thing. Like he played a bunch of people who were all kind of actiony people, but not necessarily he isn't known for just one as being like, oh, okay, yeah, here's this guy. Um Rucker Hauer, who was Blade Runner, Lady Hawk, The Hitcher, a movie called Flesh and Blood, which I actually really love. He definitely was in, like, he was all over the 80s, very
You know
much
what?
all over the
I'm gonna
80s.
I'm gonna do one more. By the way, thinking back on it, I might have been able to replace one of my movies. No, no, Kindergarten Cop was '90s. Never
Yeah,
mind.
it was.
So, I love Kindergarten Cop. One more action hero that we probably maybe should have. No, we shouldn't have, but could
Underrepresented.
have could have gotten to. I'm going to say it. The Toxic Avenger.
Oh yeah, who played the Toxic Avenger?
That guy.
Um I feel like I should know this. I feel like this is one of those that would be like, oh yeah, you totally know who this is. But I can't think of who it is.
Let's see.
There was a talk quite some time ago about rebooting Toxic Avenger. And
They did.
and then yeah, right, but then it turned into the 2023 film, which was not really all that great.
Saying, are you saying a Toxic Avenger movie is not good?
I mean, I expected more from Peter Dinklage, I guess. I don't know.
I expected more from this lesser thing.
I don't know. I thought he would put something into it that was like, oh yeah, we're all gonna go, wow, that was such a great, and it was just like, what were you guys doing?
Was it
I mean,
not promo enough for you?
I guess everybody's gotta pay their mortgage somehow, but come on.
Mitch Cohen.
Mitch Cohen. Okay, okay.
He played the Toxic Avenger,
Because
credited as Mitchell Cohen.
you know who they originally had to cast for the 2023 Toxic Avenger?
I
Someone
have
who
no
made
idea.
it to our list.
Someone that made it to our list.
Yeah. Oh,
Henry Cavill?
no. That would have been hilarious. No.
Seems like something you would do. Really?
Arnold. Yeah. 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 Arnold was set to basically star. But yeah, no, it didn't quite work because he was doing something else. I can't remember what, but yeah. And I almost feel like Arnold would have been way better in that role. And that's not a slight against Peter Dinklage at all. I actually really like Peter Dinklage a lot. It's just that wasn't the role for him. It just, I don't know, just didn't work.
Yeah, I can. I'm resisting all sorts of really insensitive jokes about Arnold.
But I do think that we actually made a fairly good dent in between our honorable mentions and our actual list in sort of like the people who were sort of known for being iconic 80s actors or 80s action heroes. I think one of the only other ones that I can think of that we really definitely missed out on was Lou Ferrigno, because Lou
Mm.
Ferrigno was in like The Adventures of Hercules, and he was in Hercules, and he was in Sinbad, and he was in a bunch of things. And there was a hot moment in time when Lou Ferrigno was like, he was the and of course he was the Incredible Hulk for how many seasons, but his name was everywhere. So I definitely think that Lou Ferrigno needed a special mention.
Well, I think at some point we will get around to doing different eras of this type of list again.
Yes,
Probably not
it's a
anytime
good list.
soon. Like, yeah, I wouldn't mind going through the 70s, the 90s, that kind of thing. The post 2000s, because God, it makes me feel so bad to think that we can do 70, 80s, 90s, and then we have to go 2000s, 2010s, 2020s.
My
What?
kid calls the 2000s the aughts, and I'm like, what does that mean, the aughts? But yeah, apparently that's it. Well,
That's,
so how about we do this a little bit differently? How would you like to recap your movies? I'll recap my movies, and I'll give you our homework for next week.
that sounds like a plan. Let's
All
see.
right, so we'll go in different order. So you recap your movies, and then I'll recap my movies.
And I'm just going to go with the movies this time because, I mean, quite frankly, you've already heard why these movies were on the list. I gave you the heroes already. So I'm just
Right,
going to give you the
right.
movies.
Okay.
So, my number 10, Iron Eagle. Number 9, 1990, The Bronx Warriors. Number 8, The Delta Force. Number 7, Aliens with the S. Number 6, Roadhouse. Number 5, Star Wars Return of the Jedi. Number 4, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, came out in '89, so it eked in under the wire, and I love it. Number 3, Beverly Hills Cop. Number 2, Rambo: First Blood, and number 1, in our hearts and our minds, Die Hard.
Nice.
Jen?
Great list. Okay, I have coming in at number 10, Superman. Number 9, Flash Gordon. Number 8, Cobra. Number 7, Escape from New York. Number 6, Star Wars. Number 5, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Number 4, Highlander. Number 3, Aliens. Number 2, The Road Warrior. And number 1, Conan the Destroyer. All right, so next week for our homework, this one is going to be fun because it's really wide open. And basically, I mean, you can really go to town with this idea because there's so many movies that would fit this. So it's going to be up to us to sort of explain why we think these are, kind of like the best of this particular topic. So the topic is
Movies
going
with
to
a human
be
cast?
yeah, that might work actually. I mean, we just did non-human, so okay, so one of my favorite tropes in both literature, and remember, I used to be a romance writer, so that's probably why I get this way. One of my favorite tropes in movies and in literature is the damsel in distress. And now we've reworded damsel in distress to be women in peril. So, when a woman is in peril, it's the damsel in distress trope. Um, and there are so many movies that have this trope in it that it's almost I mean, it would take up too many pages. Um, but I'm looking for movies that really capitalize on the central theme of the movie as the woman in peril or the damsel in distress. Um, it's not the damsel in distress does not need to be saved by somebody, just needs to basically be in distress, because some of the best movies I think are movies where the woman basically saves herself, and doesn't need to rely on the external conventions of being saved in order to succeed. But we'll save that discussion and go with, sort of like, okay, the movie is centrally formed around the theme of woman in peril.
Okay, so I have literally 1,000 movies to choose from.
See, I mean, like, honestly, this is just a wide open one. So it kind of, so picking the movie matters because there are so many. So your choice will really matter just in terms of, like, hey, I think this movie is the best of this idea. Um, and we'll see what we come up with.
I'm thinking, and I don't think I can add any Kevin Smith movies to this.
Oh no. Oh, I didn't even think of that. I'm so sorry.
Uh, because in Chasing Amy, it's not so much peril as extreme irritation and sadness. Um, yeah, I got nothing. And
Yeah.
Dogma is like the Last Zion is not the one in peril,
Yeah, and
unless
and if you think about, okay, so if you think about what the trope is for damsel in distress, right? It is not necessarily um that the woman is i- when you are dealing with a damsel in distress, right? uh, Generally the male hero comes to save the female uh, character from some kind of peril, right? But when we sort of deconstructed this, even though the trope still exists, woman in peril sort of gives it a bit more of a modern edge because we have really reconstructed stories where women in danger um, save themselves, are saved by very unconventional means, um, or actually don't need saving at all. It just happened to be that they were in danger because they put themselves in danger. Um, and that also is kind of an interesting kind of sideline. So I'll give you an example, and hopefully this isn't one that you're thinking of, but um, I would definitely uh, think that a damsel in distress movie that sort of moves away from the trope that is more centered on somebody saving them because they come up with their own kind of ideas would be the Mario movie that we just watched where uh Daisy basically, you know, yes, she gets kidnapped and there's all kinds of things happening, but she really comes up with her own method. But it still would fall under the trope of damsel in distress. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. N- it, it does fall under the stereotypical gets kidnapped, sort of needs rescuing, but that's not what the movie's about because her whole peril begins with when her kingdom's under attack, as it were, at least under threat. And
Right.
okay, hopefully I sounded smart there.
I
Um,
I think you did. I think that I think you did. I think that is you're on the right track. Another one which I won't use, but I definitely could use would be like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
haven't seen those.
Oh, okay. Um, but then I mean there's all kinds of subgenres with this too because there's the trope of deliberately distressed is another one. And that might be like Laura Croft where she puts herself in danger. So she's deliberately distressed. Things like that could also, you know, depending upon how you want to see it, that could work. But yeah, this is basically it's not just that somebody gets kidnapped or that it doesn't have to be that. It just has to be that they are basically like there is peril involved and it
Hello, Peril.
specifically is revolving around them being in that danger. That's the story.
So it can range anywhere from I've got a mission and it's going to be dangerous and I'm going to be putting myself into uh, a distress situation, all the way to where is she? Where is she? You
Yeah,
know,
I think so because I really don't want to just limit it to, oh, well, and like I said, that's why I said woman in peril, not damsel in distress. Because typically damsel in distress is the male hero comes to save her.
he's tied her to the railroad tracks.
Oh, good Lord, yes. No snidely whiplash, thank you.
Here comes the train. Here comes the train.
Uh Penelope Peril was one of my favorite cartoon characters for that very reason.
Okay, I have written down the homework, and wow, I with such a wide open category, we will probably not be crossing over nearly as much as we did this week.
This trope is um is what you would call a living MacGuffin. It is the central point of the movie, but it's a thing. The trope itself is the existence of the thing that is s- i- like a really easy one, although this isn't really movie related. I guess it could be, but it's not. In history, we could use Andromeda, who was chained to the rock so that the Kraken could come and devour her, take her underneath the sea, and Perseus comes and saves her, right? That is both sort of like the damsel in distress, but it's also the whole point of that was that the story revolves around her being in danger. It's not who saves her. It's the point is she's in danger. Somebody has to do something. Whether it's her or whether it's Perseus or whatever. Helen of Troy, you know, it's that type of thing that is sort of the most important part. But the part of a living MacGuffin is an interesting, I think, aspect of storytelling because we don't often have that. Our MacGuffins are generally things that are uh much more um not animated. There are things that are physical things or physical places, or they're just not usually living. They're inanimate in general. So a living MacGuffin is actually kind of a cool thing.
Okay. I already have a couple in mind that I'm like, oh, this is gonna make for some really interesting conversation. And I'm really looking forward to this.
Cool. I'm excited to see what we come up with. I'm sure we'll come up with some super interesting ones.
You know what I like?
What do you like?
Coming up with all sorts of creative things and ideas, and I know you do too. So tell me about one of those outlets where you connect two of your favorite things, film and cooking.
Well, yeah, that's actually a thing. So I made this website called moviesandmeals.com where I basically went into my kitchen, turned on some movies, came up with some ideas for each movie that I was watching, and yeah, it was really fun. We had a great time. We still have a great time with that. Um, Head over to moviesandmeals.com. I promise you'll find something that you'll like, or you'll come up with some inspiration for a movie themed dish yourself. It's super easy. It's a lot easier than you think it is, but sometimes you need a little bit of inspiration. So hopefully that'll do it for you. Moviesandmeals.com. Tell me where people could find, oh, I don't know, all of the things that are happening both at Wadco Media, but also for Josh. In my house, we don't call you Josh. We call you producer Josh because we have
Nice.
another Josh. So where could we find everything about producer Josh?
Well, you could always go to wadcomedia.com for all of the appropriate links to the social medias. I say go to wadcomedia.com to do that because, well, listing everything individually would be rather tiresome. So, Facebook.
Couldn't be any
It's
longer than our lists take.
as we
Sorry.
cross the 2.5 hour mark. I understand your point. Um, I okay, so Facebook links to Facebook where you can find Wadco Media. 1021. Yeah, there's a Facebook page. If you like what you're hearing, go to the Facebook page, hit like, and maybe join a conversation or two about the lists. We should probably start a conversation or two about the lists. I keep meaning to do that, but we just kind of not do that. And also, if you want to catch me on the Wadcast, that's the Wadcast, the Writers, Actors, Directors Podcast. You can find links to that at wadcomedia.com as well. Available where all fine podcasts are sold. We haven't done one in a couple weeks, but that's because Brandon works about 120 hours a week. And, you know, he gets a little tired. The little fella gets tired, so we haven't been able to really record a new episode of the Wadcast in a couple weeks, but hopefully that'll change soon. Also, if you happen to live in the Jacksonville, Florida area, that's Duval, you could head on over to Black Hat Vapor on Edgewood Avenue and pick up a copy of the joint endeavor called School Paper. It is a physical zine it's all about the local creative scene here in Jacksonville. And so far, we've released 2 episodes to much aplomb. People really seem to like it, and I like it too. What can I say? So check that out. Issues are only $2. $2, and quite frankly, if you find me, there's a good chance I have some on me, and there's an even greater chance that I'll just give you a copy for free. But it is
We've
it
talked
is
about this, by the way. This is
yes,
not the way that you end up being a millionaire. I just wanted to let you know
it
that.
is not. But I like the idea that people can read, my friends' words about all my other friends, and it sounds like, so is this just a paper about your friends? And it's like, yeah. It's like,
Mhm.
seems a little biased. I was like, yeah, I write about the things I know. And then what I don't know about, I have some of my friends write about it. And that's how school paper started. And, I take pictures. So if you want to follow me on Instagram, you can see pictures of all of these wonderful, amazing artists on my Instagram, Chitty Joshua on Instagram. What can I say? I'm not usually one for promoting the Instagram, but School Paper is also on Instagram, School Paper Checks. I think I'm getting kind of okay at taking photos. So, check them out. Maybe you like them, maybe you won't. But at the very least, maybe you'll find some really awesome music to listen to that you might not have heard otherwise. Because the cool part about all this is because, sometimes when you have a friend that creates something, you're like, yeah, buddy, that was great. Yeah, I know Jen understands that sentiment because I heard the laugh, but probably directed at me to be honest. But anyway, uh, my friends are really good at making music, so I want to promote them as much as possible. And yeah, that's you'll find a lot of their lovely faces over at my Instagram, over at School Papers Instagram, and you know, give them a listen. Start following them online. That is because otherwise it's stalking, and that's not cool. And I mean that that's not cool. Wow, what a weird note. Anyway, that's me in a nutshell. I'm going to be going back to work, my day job. School starts up in the next few weeks, and that's going to not be great because who wants to get up at 4 a.m.
Darn.
In the meantime, how come it's never in the nice time? But in the meantime, you can check out City Bus Print. That's the lovely partner of uh, School Paper. Just so many things I want to promote, and so little time to promote it. I should just come up with a new show where I talk about all this other stuff. Maybe I will. If only I knew a person that knew how to produce shows. Wait,
You're
me.
producer
I'm that
Josh.
guy.
You're producer Josh.
I'm producer Josh. So, yeah, check out all of those wonderful things. Even though I've been talking for like 10 minutes and really only talked about three things, check them all out, all three things, and hopefully you'll dig it. So, with that being said, we have our homework for the next episode. We have, uh, I guess that's pretty much it. Uh, I, shows ending
Words. Yeah, it's weird when words. Yeah, there's things.
because
Why do I feel like I'm gonna? Never mind. I won't even say it.
remember uh, what the doctor said. I don't want to go
I
because I
don't
love
want
I love hanging out and talking with you, Jen. It's too bad you live a million miles away. Otherwise, we'd be hanging out and talking all the time.
to.
So, with
It's
that
great.
being said, I guess there's only one matter on the agenda, and do you know what that is?
I am having a hard time. What is it, Josh?
Say goodnight, Jen.